we'll get started. So let's see here. We'll get started. All right. So it sounds like we are live. Cool. Yeah. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. It is morning here in lovely Colorado. And yeah, I just wanted to jump on and hang out a little bit today. I've been getting tons of questions online, so I just figured I would respond to some of those and see what other questions you have here. Feel free to jump into the chat, ask whatever you want. If it's a question about the channel, question about music, question about gigs or gear or setups or anything like that, let's chat about all that stuff today. And yeah, and then we'll go through. I'm going to do some little bit of music stuff as well, a little bit of messing around with some sound design and playing around with the setup. I have a chat that I'm doing this afternoon with the Colorado Modular Synth Society. So once we're done here, I'll be breaking everything down and traveling over to that. So so yeah, that's the plan for today. So let's see. Hey, Compressor 909, awesome, good to see ya. Let's see, D. Carmichael. I'm guessing that's Carmichael. Still Rez, hey, what's going on? Welcome everybody, and yeah, welcome to the studio on this lovely Sunday with a little bit of coffee. Yeah, so lots going to be going on coming up here in the next few weeks, and there's going to be a whole ton of stuff. I don't know if you guys have noticed on the by the way, let me know how the sound is in the chat when you're over there, if you're hearing everything okay. So yeah, lots going on over the next few weeks. You've seen that I've been posting on YouTube a whole bunch of questions of polls, I guess they're called on YouTube, trying to figure out some things about a course that I'm putting together, some other things about the channel, what everybody wants to see. I get a lot of feedback directly from people, so I just wanted to kind of throw some things out there and see what everybody was interested to do. What everybody's interested in having me do on the channel. And I know we do a lot of things like this that are chats and studio and going over gear and live setups, but if there's anything other than that you'd like to see, chuck it in the chat or shoot me a message or respond to one of the polls. I know that there's some interest in some more kind of vlog style stuff and some podcast style stuff, which is definitely in the works, just so you guys know. And especially with the opportunity coming up with Superbooth, I'm going to be leaving a week from Tuesday to head to Berlin for Superbooth. Be playing some shows in Europe as well as some demo stuff at Superbooth, which is going to be a ton of fun, and getting a chance to see all the new gear, obviously, but more importantly than anything, kind of connect with all the industry friends, whether it's YouTubers or synth industry people and stuff like that. It's a cool opportunity to hang out, and I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of content from there just because I want to show you guys what the event is like and how fun and how cool it is. So yeah, let's see. Jan Sears, good morning. How are you? Welcome. Have you used the Elektron Analog 4 Mark II much? I have one myself, and I'm wondering if it could be a solid synth for bass and other analog elements instead of a sequential product. So yeah, I used to have an Analog 4 Mark II. It was something, and the reason I used to have it, and I don't have it anymore, is I wasn't using it a lot. It is a beautiful sounding synth. It was not exactly what I was looking for, and I didn't find myself using it as much as I wanted to. And I had an opportunity for an amazing trade. So I ended up doing the trade, which I have right over there, a lovely Moog Matriarch, the black edition, which somebody traded me for my Analog 4 Mark II. So I swapped that out just because that's got a bit more of a unique sound and something that I was looking for. There, if you're interested in Analog 4 Mark II as a bass synth, there's an older video on my channel from, I don't know, a year, 2 years ago maybe, and it's all about writing bass lines, and I did that on the Analog 4 Mark II. So if you check that out, there's some interesting stuff in there. Very cool synth, and obviously, you know, with Elektron, you get the Elektron sequencer, so you get that, you get the ability to parameter lock, so it's amazing for that stuff. So yeah, it's a really cool one. Definitely cool. I don't know, instead of a sequential product, because I just think it's very different. You know, I wouldn't say it's an either or thing. I mean, I would say that's like, you know, a sports car or a pickup truck. It kind of depends if you're trying to go fast or if you're trying to haul stuff. You know, one's going to be much better than the other in either one of those scenarios. So it's kind of the same thing. Let's see here. Is there any chance that you can share properties file or make screenshot of your heat properties? Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. So I'll explain it again. I've talked about it a couple times on the channel, but let me grab my heat over here just so that I can show it while we do show and tell. Here we go, heat plus effects. So if you look, there's the saturation settings over here. I use the second one, which is saturation. So there's clean boost and then saturation, enhance, mid drive. So there's all these different ones that you can use, but I use the second one, the saturation. I will put the drive at about 12 o'clock, the level all the way up, the mix all the way up. And then on the filter side here, I use a high pass filter. I bring the frequency down to about 20, 22 on here, and it's not hertz because it's 1 to 127, like all those things. So it brings it down. I bring this down to about 20, 22, 23, kind of, you dial it in for your own sound. And then I'll add a bit of resonance. So that gives a cool resonant boost at about 40 hertz-ish. So it gives you a really big, super booming low end. And then because we add low end here, I tend to add a little bit of high end here just to kind of smooth it out. And that's it. And then once it's like that, I save it. And that's my one preset that I use in the heat. Now the heat plus effects is a little different because with that one, I also add in the bass mono function, and I'll set that at about 200 hertz. So everything below 200 hertz is mono, everything above 200 hertz is allowed to be stereo. And then a really tiny, tiny, tiny bit of compression. And the reason why I do just a tiny bit is that if you over compress when you're doing it on your master, you're going to lose your kick drum. You're going to lose your all the kind of the beef of your kick drum unless you put a really slow attack on it, and then you can let some of that through. But I'm just not a big fan of putting much more than just a light bit of master compression. So yeah, so that's my settings. Let's see here. Good sound. Thank you very much. Good morning from Long Beach, California. Hey, you're up early. You're a whole hour earlier than me. Let's stay. Can't stay long. Is about to serve up tea for the family. That sounds awesome. Have you received the Digitakt 2 yet? No, I'm still waiting. It's driving me crazy. It is, I have to tell you, it is the most anticipated piece of gear in a very, very long time in here. I think the last time I was this super excited about receiving a piece of gear was the Percons. And so, yeah, Digitakt 2, I can't wait. Hopefully I'll get it in the next few days so that I can get it up to a certain level of where I have everything set up and understanding so that I can take it on my trip, because I'd love to use it in my gigs in Berlin and Brussels and all that stuff. So yeah, I hope so. We'll see how it works out. Let's see, video blog of travel to out-of-state gigs. Yes, that's actually what the plan is. So the first part of these kind of vlog type things that I'm going to post is going to be about Superbooth. So I didn't want to just do I'm not much of a reporter, so I didn't want to just do like, hey, this is Circo reporting live from Superbooth. And so I'll let Nick Bat do all that stuff because he's the king. And Bo and all those guys, they're all really good at that stuff. So what I'm planning on doing is a little bit about the actual kind of functionality of traveling with gear and traveling to gigs. So how I prepare, what I bring, so how I pack stuff up so that I can travel safely, what I bring and what I don't bring and why. I have this kind of emergency bag that I bring with me that's like certain, extra cables and connectors and things like that. So I'll go through that a little bit and kind of a packing list of everything. So that way you guys can see a little bit about how we get from point A to point B with all this gear and what decisions are made to bring certain things and not certain things in order to be able to travel in a functional way. I'll go over kind of the bags I use and all that stuff. Just so if you guys need any of that stuff, you're interested, I'll point you in the right direction. And then we'll also be doing some of the actual travel stuff, which is for me fun. Probably my favorite thing to do along with music is travel. Which is why I love that I get to travel a lot for work. Plus, I get to travel a lot for fun, and so it's one of my favorite things to do. So very excited to show the Berlin travel tips. I'm going to do kind of a daily walkthrough of Superbooth, what I see, kind of the cool things that I'm finding. It's not going to be a gear review thing. It's going to be if something's interesting to me personally for the way I perform or the way I play, or something that's just like super creative and cool and new and interesting. I'll definitely show that off in some of those videos just to let you guys know what's going on and what's coming down the pipe. I know especially with Modular, there's so much gear out there. There's just literally thousands and thousands of modules, and they all have these like bizarre names, so you don't really know what they are or what they do. So it's cool when you can get a little bit of like, hey, here's the X Bizarro Triptych whatever, and it does this. So then you can at least go, oh, that sounds like something cool that I might use, and not have to just go by the name. It's kind of like buying breakfast cereal, like some crazy name and you don't even know what it tastes like. All right, so let's see here. Guy called Bunny, hey, welcome. Let's see, if you had an MC707 and TR8S combination, would you take the two stereo outputs of each device into your console interface, or just take one stereo output from each device? I guess it kind of depended on what I was doing. So the MC707 has a lot of built-in stereo ability effects. So I would definitely do stereo out of that. As far as the interface goes and bringing it in, whether I do one channel or another, it really depends on what I'm going to do with the signal. If I'm bringing it in to record, so if I'm producing something in a groove box like an MC707 and I want to record it in, I might want to have control over left and right in the DAW or whatever I'm recording into. But if I don't, just having a single stereo pair going into one channel is fine. You can just have a stereo channel and adjust pan and whatever you need to do. TR8S, if it's just going to be doing drums, that could honestly just be mono. You don't necessarily need it unless you're going to do a bunch of stereo panning with hi-hats and stuff. But yeah, it really depends on what you're going to do with the signal in the end. One of the cool things with, Elektron devices or in Modular, the Expert Sleepers ES9 or a few other things is you can multi-track. And so with that, you get a ton of control over things. Whether it's two stereo outs or one stereo out, I don't know that it would really make that much difference to me, because if I was just getting a stereo signal, I'm not multi-tracking. So I think it would be less important, at least for me personally. Let's see here. Can I listen to something you made on your phone? Sure, send me a message. Send me a private message on the side. I'll take a listen. Digitakt 2 comes in Friday. Oh man, I hope mine comes before that, but we'll see. Can't wait though. On the analog rhythm, do you use the compressor? If yes, what settings? Again, super, super, super light. For me, I don't use a ton of compression. It's if it's I'll use it as a sound shaping thing. Like if I've got the ability to sidechain, for example, when I was using the rhythm in my live setup and I had an ability to send out the kick separately, I would put that into the sidechain input. There's a sidechain input right here on the Endorphins Ghost, and that Ghost can be really super broad. As far as the sound, it's like this really wide stereo wash the way I have it set up. And so to be able to sidechain that and kind of get a little bit of sidechain pumping was pretty cool. But other than that, you know, I think that, controversial subject here, but I think that compression is overused, over discussed, and overemphasized. It has its time and its place, but I think everybody thinks that compression is like this magic wand that you wave at the end and it makes everything sound amazing. And honestly, it's way easier for compression to make your stuff sound really awful than it is to make it sound really good. So I would say use a tiny bit of compression and that's really it. And that was kind of what I would do on the rhythm, because there's a lot of sound coming out of that. There's a lot of channels, and anytime you have a master compressor on something, if you do anything more than just the slightest little bit, you're gonna lose things, you're gonna miss things. And it, you know, you might want to have your kick come through at a certain time and not at another, and maybe it just changes it. You're gonna have really dramatic dynamic differences when you drop out instruments and when you bring them back in. So if you're not changing the compression settings all the time, man, it's really hard to dial it into something that helps a lot. So I would say light compression to kind of get those random top things under control and to bring up the kind of middle pieces, but a tiny little bit, really, really light, especially if it's master compression. Okay, where are we at here? Matthew Helton, have you changed the audio routing in your setup after switching to the Digitakt? Do you have that going through the Octatrack A, B? Yes. So the way this is routed right now, and this may change when I get the Digitakt 2, but for right now, Digitakt, because it's doing mostly drums and percussion, is going into the A-B side of the Octatrack, and oops, I'm gonna make this so you can see it. So Digitakt's going into the A-B side of the Octatrack, and these are the master outs coming from the W&D performance mixer, which is all of this stuff being routed through this mixer. The master outs of that are going into C and D. So that way, using the EasyBot effects template in here, I've got drums on one side and, you know, melodics, which I always kind of you do like air quotes when I say melodics, because my music is more like tonal percussive than it is melodic. So it's tonal things and bass things, or sorry, tonal things and drum things. But yeah, for the most part, most of the effects that I use in the effects template are the ones that are master effects, because I tend to use it more like DJ style effects, like you would a master filter or a master reverb or things like that. So there's a couple that are individual that I use that are pretty cool, but less important for me. The Digitakt 2 has a really interesting compressor. You know, we were talking about compressor a minute ago, and it's one of the things, you know, it's kind of one of the under the hood things that the Digitakt 2 has that's not getting a lot of love right now. And I think that it's, for me, one of the most interesting things that it does. I may end up running my masters of my modular into the Digitakt 2 and then have everything go into the Octatrack. And the reason being is that the Digitakt 2 has its master compressor. You can decide, kind of like the effects block in the Syntakt, where you can choose which instruments are being routed to it. You can choose which instruments are going through the master compressor and which are bypassing it. So what you can do is internally sidechain your kick track to the master compressor, which you always could in the Digitakt before, in this one. But then if you turned it up, you would lose your kick, because you'd sidechain from something that's in the same signal. So every time the kick hit, it would turn things down. So you would lose your kick. And with the new one, you can route everything to the master compressor and then eliminate the kick from the master compressor, so you can sidechain selected tracks or all of them without having to also compress the kick. And so for me, that's a massive update that it has. I hope they do that with all the machines because it's such a good idea. So this routing may change, but yes, I did change the routing a little bit since I started using the Digitakt again. Let's see here, where we at? Sorry, I'm scrolling back a little bit. What I meant is whether you take the main outputs only or the main and assignable outs of the MC707. Again, it really depends on what you're gonna do with it. I mean, a lot of stuff that I record, I'm doing in here and then I'm just recording a stereo out and that's it. And I'm not multi-tracking, but there are cases where I wanna be able to multi-track, so then I'll take out multiple outputs. It just really depends. And again, like the TR8S, I know it has multiple outputs there. So if you had a situation like I do here where you have a module or another machine or an outboard compressor that has the ability to sidechain, it's cool to take just that one output and then everything else kind of grouped together. But you can look at it kind of like buses. So if you want to bus things together and process them together, you can, or if you want to do them individually, you can. It just depends really on what you're trying to do with it and how good the mix is inside the machines and how much you need to change that mix once it's out of the machine. So it comes down to your own music and your own preferences. Let's see here. For modular setup, what would you choose as an entry point for somebody wanting to learn? Great question. And it's something I actually really enjoy talking about only because I'm really new to modular. I started in modular about 2 years ago and from scratch. I had intentionally avoided it for years because I knew I was going to go down the rabbit hole and I was always feeling a bit overwhelmed by it. And a lot of the performances that I had heard of people with modular, it sounded to me like somebody just learning how to use a synthesizer in front of people. It was just like bleeps and bloops and all over the place. And I said, well, I need way more control than that. Then I heard a couple of performances. In particular, there was one during COVID that Julia Bondar did that was really amazing. And I listened to it and I was like, wow, she's got a ton of control over what she's doing. And this sounds amazing. And it's very purposeful and she's getting cool sounds from it. So that kind of led me down that road. So because of that, I love talking about getting started because there's a lot of reasons why I didn't get started. And, looking back at it, I got some really great advice from some friends, from Travarsi, from Ihor, from a few other people, kind of pointing me in the right direction of what to do to get started. And the best advice I got was figure out what you want it to do in a pretty limited way, and then start there and don't get distracted. I think that too many people try to go down the road of getting it to do all things all the time for everyone, and it's like they want to make the ultimate, groovebox drum machine, synth, polyphonic, multi-track, mixed, compressed effects all over, and then you end up spending tens of thousands of dollars and you've got a machine that takes up an entire wall in your house. But if you take a look, and I will switch the view here so you can see this rig that I have set up here. Again, it's very purposeful to what I do, the way I perform. So I'm using the Elektron machines for drums, whether it's the Digitakt, the Digitakt 2. I was using the Rhythm for a while as well. So I don't need drums in here. So that takes one thing off the table. I've also got, so I don't need performance effects in here. I do have, and I'll talk about this in a second, sound shaping effects, but not performance effects. And there's no drum modules. I mean, they can all be used as drum modules, but there's no dedicated drum modules. And there's no performance effects in here because I'm using the Octatrack. So what I have here is a multi-voice synth machine. And there are some people who like to have their modular be all one synth, where it's like I've got a voice going through multiple effects to shape the sound and be processed and be modulated using modulators, going through processing, effects, things like that. And they have the ability to make one sound into a bunch of different things over time, or they'll have it all patched so that they can kind of hit go and it will do a thing that they've told it to do. The way I set up my setup was that I have very little automated modulation in here because my performances are live and they're improvised. So I don't want to push a button and have it do something pre-planned because I don't know what I'm going to do before I get started. So setting up a bunch of complex cross modulation of things doesn't fit the style and the way I perform. So I tend to choose voices that have a lot of sound variation, a lot of hands-on control, and I'm also in some cases a fan of voices that are whole synth voices in one unit instead of separating out filters and envelopes and modulation and things like that. So like for example, I have the Bastille Pizza here, which is set up so that it has its own internal envelope and it has the ability to be modulated by hand. It's very hands-on kind of knob, functional knobs and sliders, and it's going through a separate filter. Then I have the Oxycoral, which is, it has a filter built in, it has effects built in, it has envelopes built in, and it has 8 different voices. So it can be, it's basically, if you're familiar with the Platts module, this has 8 instances of Platts in it. So it can be 8 separate voices. I'm not even using CV to sequence this. This is coming in via MIDI from the Oxy One, and it has its own channel. So I have an 8-channel multi-sequencer that is sequencing the 8 channels of this as 8 separate voices. And I have those set up on different types of voices, and Manuel is a genius and he's constantly coming up with new voices to add into this. I'm a big fan of the Moog style 3 oscillator voice that he has right now. So I'm using a bunch of instances of that, an acid voice, and I think an FM one as well. Then I have the BIA from Noise Engineering, which has its own envelope built into it, and it's a ton of ability to change sound, and that's going through a separate filter. And then I have the Quadranted Swarm, which has 2 filters built in, envelopes built in, wave folding, shaping, LFOs, stuff like that built in. Plus it has a sequencer built in, which I very, very rarely use. And then those are coming into this mixer, and then via sends, I have a dual effects unit from Erica Synths and the Endorphins Ghost. And those are really used for sound shaping. So I'll send something really simple through it. So let's see here if we can play something really simple. Something from the Swarm. So you can see there's a pretty simple sound going through there. But if I send this through the Ghost, oops, turn on the sequencer here. If I send this through the Ghost, listen how it changes that simple sequence. So again, as you can hear, that's all the Ghost kind of trailing off. So as you can hear, the Ghost isn't set up as like performance effects, like, oh, I'm going to do a big build up and I'm going to do a filter sweep and I'm going to put some like selected reverb on this bit. It's not that. It's really designed to be sound shaping and to kind of make the whole thing sound better. So again, back to your question. I know that was a long explanation for this. I wanted to show you that the reason why this is set up the way it is because I started with a specific direction. I wanted multiple hands-on controlled voices that I could use in live performance. Now, that's why I built this case the way I built this case. If your need is effects processing for a bunch of keyboards on stage, your modular is going to look really different. If you want a really intricate, sequenced drum machine, you're going to want something totally different. You're going to want a sequencer. You're going to want multiple drum hits. You're going to want a mixer for all of those. You're going to want to be able to, process each drum differently, so you can have different processing on your kick than on your hi-hats and things like that. So where to start? I would say it depends on where you want to end. If you want an all-in-one, I would say start with a couple of modules that are pretty easy to use and that do a lot, that are whole voices. So that way you don't have to divide things out. Or you could start with one voice, one envelope, one VCA, and kind of build out a single voice monosynth and learn how to use modular, and then kind of go down that road. And then you can build out more of those if you choose, or you could go this route if you choose, whatever you choose to do. But anyway, long answer about modular, but it's kind of a long, complicated system. Let's see here. What are you looking forward to when getting a Digitakt 2? Wasn't it overlap with the features from the assimilator? There's a reason the assimilator is not in my case anymore because I wasn't using a lot of the kind of audio to CV out modulation stuff. Kind of goes back to what I was saying before. I don't have a lot of modulators, and that's where the assimilator really shines, is using those outputs as modulators for other things. And being able to, bit reduce and do all kinds of stuff with the samples. Doesn't time stretch. It doesn't, there's a lot that it doesn't do. It's a very good modular version of a Digitakt 1. And although I should say or a 2, because it does do stereo samples, but you have to have 2 channels. So instead of being 8, then you've got 4 stereos because it's going out. So different thing. The Digitakt 2, very different machine. First and foremost, we talked about this on the last live stream or a couple live streams ago. The Elektron boxes themselves, where they shine and where no one touches them, and I'm willing to debate this in the comments if you'd like, but where no one touches the Elektron boxes is when you have a sequencer that's attached to a sound source, whether it's a sampler in the case of the Digitakt or synths in the case of like the Syntakt or the D-Tone. When you have this sequencer attached to that thing and you can parameter lock anything in the box to any step, any way you want to do it, there's a ridiculous amount of power to that. So the assimilator could never do that. Like I would have to pre-set up a million CC commands to send from the Oxy 1 or from an Elektron box to go into the assimilator to lock different things, and I'd have to send individual things, and it's super convoluted. When you have an Elektron box, where it's amazing is when you're parameter locking any of those parameters of the sound engine to individual steps of the sequencer. Nothing touches it. So the Digitakt being able to do that, plus the built-in effects, plus the compressor that we were talking about before, and a bunch of other things, it just makes it crazy powerful. So yeah, for me, it's nothing like the assimilator. It definitely replaces the assimilator. So that's why I pulled out the assimilator and I put the Swarm in my case, because I won't need it anymore. And I also pulled out the 1010 black box because the Digitakt 2 does time stretching, and that's all I was using that for, was kind of vocals and atmospheres that needed to be time stretched. So the Digitakt 2 will take that place. And I pulled out the Syntakt just for my traveling rig, just to reduce down the number of boxes that I'm bringing, because I was using that so I had more voices to choose from in my setup. And now with 16 tracks on the Digitakt 2, it's going to give me, I'll still be able to have 8 tracks of drums like I had in the Rhythm, and then another 8 tracks of voices coming from samples that I have a ton of control over. So it basically makes them like synth engines in the Digitakt 2, so I won't need to bring that extra box. So I'm able to save. I pulled out a simulator, 1010 black box, Syntakt, and rhythm for a couple reasons, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And I added in the Swarm and the Digitakt 2. So I swapped out a lot of boxes for less boxes, and it makes it easier to travel. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about travel. We can talk about that some here today if you guys are into it. Ask me in the chat if you want to talk about the travel stuff and packing and what we use for that and stuff. But yeah, that's why for me the Digitakt 2 is not. It is a sampler like the assimilator, but that's kind of where it ends. They each do their own thing really, really well. Let's see here. I've noticed that when I connect my Roland Phantom to my Yamaha, the sound is a lot punchier and clearer than my former Mode 2 interface. Honestly, I am not familiar with that Yamaha console, so I don't know. Could be converters. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. If there's somebody in the chat who knows those and has some input for D Carmichael 00, I would put those in there. I honestly don't know. Let's see. Do you use your own mixer out to the house system, or do you record your live sets directly? So I use the Octatrack as my performance mixer. So the way this is set up, like I mentioned before, is drums are going into one side, this is going into another side. I have mixer control here over all my individual voices, and within the Elektron machines, there's mixer control in here as well. So actual mixing, like level mixing, does that. Then it gets summed through the Octatrack, and that's where it gets its kind of final performance effects processing using these performance scenes and the crossfader. So that allows me to add kind of dynamic interest and all that stuff to my live set. And then it goes out, and then I just have a stereo pair that goes out to the house. And what's cool about that is that I can go to, if the house is if there's like a DI box that I go out to and it goes out to the house, I can do that. Or if it is a DJ mixer, depending, because I play a lot of gigs where I'll be the only live act and there'll be DJs playing. So I've got cables that will go quarter out to RCA in, so I can send those directly into a DJ mixer, and then they just put me on one channel for volume. And that allows me, what's cool about that is it allows me to mix in when there's a DJ playing, so you don't have to stop and then start a new show. So I can mix in, I can beat match my rig to whatever they're playing, and then I can just mix in and have it be seamless and kind of continue on the night if it's a club night, rather than having it be more like a live show where it's like, okay, now we stop, everybody claps, thank you very much, and then a couple seconds later we start the next person. So it's I prefer the seamless transition, and it allows me to do that with the outputs that way. Let's see here. Used to use an Analog Heat MK2 in line with the 06. Yeah, Analog Heat MK2, even the MK1 and the Heat Plus effects, the power of making the signal sound better is the same with all of those, because they have that same kind of saturation that's really super cool. Let's see, Octatrack user here, pair with the Digitakt 2 or Syntakt for techno. All depends on the workflow you like. And I've talked about this a bunch. Both machines are amazing, and amazing in their own way. And what it comes down to is the workflow you like. If you like a synth workflow, Syntakt, 100%. If you like a sample workflow, Digitakt 2, 100%. Digitakt 2 has a few more bells and whistles, which my guess is some of them will come to the Syntakt, although because of the analog signal path, I think there are some things that won't be able to go to the Syntakt. The Syntakt has the effects block, which again, I use for sound shaping and not performance, so that becomes more like a synth engine. If you like that and if you want a synth workflow, go Syntakt, it's great. And if you want Sample workflow, which I used to not be a fan of. I'm warming to slightly now, but I don't like sample management. I don't like file management and digging into my computer and files and folders and organizing and do it like that. Just feels like I work on a computer all day with my day job, so I just feel like I'm dealing with files and folders all day. So I wasn't a fan of that. But now that my sample library is kind of getting more organized and I'm doing that less, yeah, I can see that. But it really comes down to the workflow you like. That's the shorter answer. Just got UA interface with compression, and you're right, the best setting is almost none at all. Yeah, I think that's, if I had to say, if somebody said, what's the best setting for a compressor, that would be my answer. I'm gonna use your answer from now on. The best setting is almost none at all. That's what I would say, but it all comes down to your sound and what you wanna do. Get a Rhythm MK1 instead. Yeah, the Rhythm's still my, if I had to sell every piece of gear in my studio, the Rhythm is still the last one I would sell. So take that for what you will. It's not in my live setup because it's bigger, and I tried to scale everything down, and you'll see why when we talk about the travel bits. But yeah, it's still the king. It's for me, it's the best drum machine ever made. And it is one of the best groove boxes ever made if you don't need to sequence any external gear. That's where it just falls on its face. But other than that, yeah, it's crazy good. Let's see here. Check your DM. Okay, I will do that after the live stream. Ask because I know EasyBot's template splits percussion and melodic effects since the Digitakt will be doing mixed duties. Was curious how you were planning on handling that. Yeah, I don't use a lot of those split effects. Where those really shine on EasyBot's template is with the loopers. So being able to loop drums and change drum patterns while you still have your melodic side playing live, or vice versa. Being able to loop, a perfect loop of your live side and like turn the machine off, load a new something and whatever, while the drums keep playing and you can keep tweaking them, and while there's a sample that's looping, and then crossfading it back in. So you can crossfade in melodic elements while the drums stay the same, or crossfade in drums while the melodic elements stay the same. It's very cool for that. I don't use that very often. And so it's less important for me. But yeah, it's a cool effect. So if you want to use that, you definitely want to keep your drums and percussion separate, going into those two separate pairs of inputs into the Octatrack. Let's see. Can you use that modular mixer for non-modular gear? Yeah, you can. There's individual gains per channel on this, individual gains per channel up here, as well as the ability to send 2 mono signals to one channel or a stereo pair to some of them as well. So like when I was using the 1010 black box in my live set, I had that separate and it was going into a stereo channel in this mixer, and that way it was kind of being summed up to that. And because this is used to modular level, I would kind of gain it up a bit. But yeah, you can do either or both. And what's cool about the W&D Performance Mixer is it's got 2 separate sends. You can decide which send it's going to go to. And with returns, you can return to a track, or it's got a regular return. And then it also has the ability to queue. So these white buttons down here can be cues. So if you're doing stuff live, and that's why I originally got it. I thought I was going to be queuing things while I wrote live and then bringing them in. And I just found that was really distracting for me, and I stopped paying attention to what was going on in the room and what the crowd was listening to, and I would kind of let things go on for too long while I was working on something in my headphones. So now I've gotten to the point where I know my gear well enough, and I've got some kind of fallback safety things for keeping things in key and stuff like that. So I don't have to hear it. I'll write something on the fly and I'll bring it in slowly, or I'll filter it in, or I'll whatever, so that I can hear it. If it sounds bad, I fix it really quick. And I've gotten to know my gear well enough that I know how to quickly get to the sound that I want even if it doesn't come in immediately that way. So I'll change it very quickly and kind of go the direction I want, whether that's, shortening up an envelope or something like that. I'll be able to hear that quickly and jump in on it. Okay. Hey, Tough Chunks, what's going on? I will see you in a week and a half in Berlin. Too bad I won't see you in Brussels. I'm coming to your city, man. I'm coming to your city and you're not going to be there. I'm crushed. Anyway, I understand. Vacations are important. Let's see. Do I use a DI box or run the synths right into the mixer interface? So I don't use a DI box, but I do generally use the analog heat. So as I mentioned earlier on, what my settings are, I have kind of a preset, and that's my if you want to call it this, that's my mastering. Particularly if I know I'm going to be playing a show with people who are DJing, so they're playing studio produced and mixed and mastered tracks. If you don't have something that kind of adds that saturation and gives you some low end boost and does that stuff, your sound sounds very different. And so for better or for worse, and you want to be part of the evening. You don't want to stand out in any kind of way, whether it's, wow, that's crazy loud and it makes everybody else sound bad, or wow, that's, all of a sudden it sounds really thin. I love that saturation setting in the heat because live performances can sound really thin. Because you'll have individual sounds, whereas when something gets mastered, generally one of the first things that you add on a mastering chain is saturation, so that you can kind of fill out the spaces in between, harmonically in between the notes, and give it that kind of more full sound. And the heat does that. The analog heat does that, and that's why I think it gets used so much. I know that's why I use it, is to really kind of fill everything out and make things not sound thin. The only other way to make things not sound thin is to add in more elements, and then your music gets really cluttered. And I like to try and keep things relatively simple. I mean, sometimes I'm guilty of it getting cluttered as well. But so I have things like the ghost and then like the analog heat on the end of the chain to help fill that out, so that you don't have to add elements to fill out those bits in the middle. Let's see here. Play something. Oh, I'm not going to play I'm not going to play the music on the live stream. I'll listen to it for sure, and I'll reach back out to you. But I don't have a way to play something like that on the live stream. Let's see. As a completely blind musician, which Elektron box would you consider the most accessible outside of samples and cycles? Actually, if you like the samples and cycles workflow, I think any of the digiboxes, whether it's Digitakt, Digitone, Syntakt, would be you'd have a similar kind of muscle memory with where the buttons are, because you still have the 8 knobs next to the screen controlling the 8 functions that are on the screen, and you still have the buttons that are down on the bottom of those knobs deciding which screen you're on. So it is very tactile. So if you hit button number 1, if you hit button number 1, you're in the trig section, and then you've got 8 parameters, and that's those 8 knobs. If you hit button number 5, you're on the LFO page, and so you'd be able to memorize which those individual individual parameters are that you could use. So you don't have, like, for example, if you had a touch screen, you wouldn't give it any kind of feedback. You wouldn't know that it's the second or the third or the fourth knob or button that you were pressing. So I think being blind and wanting to have tactile feedback, I think any of those boxes would be really solid for you, because they don't tend to have depth of menu. Some of them have 2 layers, and that's really it. Digitakt 2, I would caution, because they added a lot more functionality, they added a few more layers to some of those menus. So there's some of them that have 2, 3, 4 layers deep, and that might not be as easy to manipulate. Whereas Digitakt, Digitone, Syntakt would be would give you a lot more tactile feedback that would be easier to remember if you can't actually see what's going on the screen and need to be able to correlate that to what you're manipulating. So yeah, I would say any of those. Yeah. Hey, Travarsi, what's going on? How's it going? Yeah, we're saying the same thing. Digitakt. Let's see. Ever consider doing a performance studio-oriented techno course? Yes. If you just joined us, I was talking about that actually early on in the stream. A lot of what's coming up right now, if you've noticed, I've put out a bunch of polls lately on YouTube on the community section of it, so that asking people what they want to see in a course, because I'm putting a course together, and asking everybody like what's the best way you like to do courses and what types of courses you've liked and not liked, and kind of point me in the direction of examples of things you've really enjoyed so that I can see what they did and kind of take the best of the best so that I can put it together. But yes, I'm actually, there's a course in the works right now. So glad to know. If you go on my website, if you go to circolive.com, on the very first page, or actually you can go, there's a courses page. If you go to that, there's a way you can sign up for an email list to know when that's going to come out and be one of the first people, because I'm going to do a limited number of people in the course at once, because there is going to be a live element to it, live like via Zoom. And so I want to keep that relatively small. So there's going to be a limited number of spaces. So definitely go there and let me know if you want to be on the list for that first group that comes out. Sorry for the coughing. Let's see here. Thank you for the work and energy you're putting in here. Love your channel. Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it. I always love to hear that. I mean, the whole idea of doing this is to kind of, as Ricky Tinez says, share the knowledge. And was why I started this channel in the whole first place, was to help other people not have to struggle through a lot of the things that I had to struggle through when I was learning this stuff, and see if I could help you kind of shortcut things a little bit. Hey Mark, maybe I'll see you in Amsterdam soon. Would you consider using an extra sequencer like the Bloom from Qubit? The Oxy is great and all, but sometimes I feel my set would benefit from more randomization. Yeah, I mean, the Oxy can do a lot of randomization, so I think it really depends on what kind of randomization you're looking for. If you're looking for like true random, yeah, I mean, it might do that. One of the things I showed on the last stream, if you go back and watch that, is, well, I can show it again now. Actually, why not? It's how to use two sequencers together. It makes it, it's cool to be able to use the Oxy sequencer and an Elektron sequencer. So if we were to go here and let's just do, do I have anything? Okay, so yeah, so if I go into the Oxy sequencer and we use just this track here, so that's just coming from the Oxy, sequencing this track on the Digitakt. But if we go to that track, we can then go in and you see the sequencer is empty, but you can add in. So now it's got some steps coming from this sequencer and steps coming from here. I can add in some more. So then you've got them coming from both. And then if you go into some of these, the steps that are in here, you can add randomization. You know, let's say we want this to happen every 33% of the time and this one to happen every 75% of the time. So then, and then you can go in and change these, change the notes here. And then we can generate random pitch on these here. So you see these are happening random times. These are happening every time. You can add actually in probability on these as well. So you can have two sequencers of probability playing off of each other, which gives you some really very cool opportunities to get a ton of randomness. And it really depends on the kind of music you're making, but I'm a big fan of controlled randomness. I use it a ton in what I play. And so it's cool to be able to have two sequencers play together. I mentioned earlier, I have a video on the channel about how to do bass lines, and it was on the Analog 4. And I was using that with another sequencer as well. So it was showing how to do cool bass lines and generating bass lines using two, and using different versions of or different amounts of each sequencer. So yeah, so if you want more randomness, having two sequencers sequence the same thing is a great way to do that, especially if they are sequencers that can, if it needs to be melodic, if they can both be set to the same key, and then you can have them do random things within the key, would be really cool. If it's percussive, the key doesn't really matter as much. So yeah, that's definitely a fun thing to do. Let's see here. Tell me more about my experience with the black box. The black box was cool. I love it. I still have it. I'm going to keep it. Use it for its own good stuff. What I've always used it for in my live set is time stretching and launching loops, basically. So you can set up each, like, it does a ton of things. So you can sequence from it, you can have multiple voices, you can have multiple sequencers by track and all kinds of cool stuff. But the way I was using it was, you've got a page of 16 slots, and I was using each one of those as a loop clip launcher, kind of like launching a clip in Ableton, and being able to hit it. It launches it in time, and you can set it to loop or to play as a one shot. And so I was using it to time stretch vocals mostly, some atmospheres, but mostly vocals. So if I wanted to use a vocal in my set and I wanted it time stretched to what I was doing, I would have it in the black box, and when it was time to put that vocal, you just hit the touchscreen and it launches that loop, and it keeps looping it in time. So it's a super powerful that way. It's great for sampling in too, to be able to sample things from the modular. Ricky Tinez has a fantastic video about that, about how to just grab loops and then have them be part of your set. So you can even do that live. You can kind of have the modular going into there. You can loop things and then keep that loop going while you change up something else on the modular. So it does a ton of stuff. I like the balance they've found between touchscreen and knobs. I think that things like the MPC Live for me is way too touchscreeny, so you don't have any kind of muscle memory, and the knobs are never kind of the same orientation as the things that they're doing online or on the screen. Whereas the black box, it's got the 4 knobs, and they, depending on what screen you're on, they do different things. So I think it reminds me a lot like the Elektron, where you've got, when you're on one screen, these 8 knobs do their 8 things. So I love it. Love the black box. I love the fact that there are, you can assign different outputs, which is really cool too. So you can have it going out to different destinations, and you can assign which sequencer or which track goes to each one of those outputs. I think there's 4, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, it's a great machine, and it's tiny, and they keep updating it, and it keeps doing, super cool stuff. So I love it. I'm a huge fan of the black box, and I'll keep it. I just won't need it in my live set, and I was trying to scale down the number of boxes and connections and cables and potential failure points and things like that. So that's why it kind of came out of the set. But yes, let's see here. To me, it's fun to hear that you are a techno king at night. In the morning, you detach the capes and go to work. Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I'm fortunate enough. I've been consultant in the food and beverage industry for a long time now. And so I get to work from home, which is great. So I get to spend a lot of work time and play time in my studio. And it's cool because if I want to take a break during work, I can just kind of like take a pause, mess around with some stuff, clear my head, and come right back in. So it's yeah, it's a lot of fun. And it's cool because it affords me a lot of time to travel, and I score a lot of points from work travel, which allows me to travel more comfortably when I'm traveling to a gig or going on vacation or whatever. So yeah, we'll talk about that when I do the travel vlogs. But yeah, it's very cool. Let's see here. Sample management is a pain in the ass for me also. I'd like more immediacy from the box. Thanks. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. I mean, it's the Digitakt and the Syntakt. They're both basically the same machine because at its core, Elektron is a sequencer company, and they attach the sequencer to different things. So if you like samples, get a Digitakt because it's that sequencer and that workflow that I love attached to a sampler. If you like synths, get a Syntakt because it's that sequencer and that workflow that I like attached to a synth. If you want a sample mangler, get an Octatrack, although it's a little bit more convoluted to use. And if you want both samples and sequences together and you want to be able to layer them, get a Rhythm. That's just kind of the way it works. Let's see here. Hey, your video looks great. Is that just a good camera or color correcting? Actually, you know what? It's not even a good camera. I got this thing. I don't know. I don't have the other one here. Yeah, here, I'll show it to you. I got this set. This is the camera that I'm using for both views right now. I've got two of them. It's from Logitech, and it's called the Mevo, and it comes in a set of 3 of these cameras so that you can get multi-view. And then they have this free app for iPad that you can do the kind of director thing like you would do with OBS, and they attach wirelessly and they're battery powered. So like right now I have them plugged into USB just so I can stream forever. That's why, by the way, we had hum last time because the Oxy was plugged into the same power supply as they were. And so it was giving me some USB feedback. But yeah, these are, they come in a set of 3 cameras, and then you get the free app. And with the app, you can live stream or you can record, you can live stream to multiple destinations. Like I could send this same stream at the same time to like YouTube and Twitch and Facebook Live and all that stuff. I'm just doing it on YouTube for you guys. But yeah, it's a super cool setup. I love it. I've been really, really happy with it, and it's amazingly easy to use. So I can just leave it set up and switch on the iPad, set up a destination, hit live, and we go live. So yeah, I'm a big fan of these. And there's a third one that I'm not using right now, but I could have a third view, and then you can switch between the views on the screen and all that stuff. So yeah, tons of fun. Appreciate it though. I'm glad it looks good. How would you compare the 707 sequencer to the Syntakt Digitakt sequencer? I assume you're saying the MC 707 and not the TR 707. But I don't know how to say this diplomatically. I will just say, and I mean, I get a hard time all the time for being a fanboy, and I am a fanboy of things that work really well. And I'm a fanboy of things that work in a workflow that clicks with my brain. So for me, there's no comparison between the Roland workflow and the Elektron workflow. They're just like night and day, totally different. And for me, I had an MC707, I had a TR8S, I have a vintage 727. A friend of mine explained it the best once, and I use this all the time, so you probably heard me say this before, but for me personally, the Roland workflow is a hostile workflow. You feel like it's working against you. You're constantly struggling to do things in an immediate way. It's just not set up that way. Whereas the Elektron workflow, once you learn the workflow, it's incredibly easy and immediate and fast. I always asterisk that by saying the modern Elektron workflow. The Octatrack is still one of the older machines, just like the Mono Machine and Machine Drum. It's from that era. So the Octatrack is a much more complicated, convoluted machine because it does so many different things. To try to get it to do all those different things, you have a lot of different menus and setups and routings and things like that. That's what makes it so powerful, but it's also what makes it way less easy to use than the modern machines. The MC707, along with the MPC, the Deluge, the Machine Plus, all these kind of all-in-one groove boxes, the more things you try to do, the more menus you have to have, or screen space, or knobs, or button combinations, or whatever. So the MC707 for me has this combination of it does a ton of things and it has limited screen space and knob functionality to do them. So the only way for them to actually be able to be done is to be ridiculously menu divey. And you just go in and in and in and you change and change and change, and then you come back out to another, and then you go in and then you change one parameter, then you come back out, and then you go into another menu and you change one parameter and you come back out. So because of that, that workflow and the workflow on, say, the Digitakt are nothing alike. I'll show you an example. With the Digitakt, if you want to, so like let's go back to that thing we were just playing. I'm actually going to take it off of here and go back to this sequencer. So if I go into this sequencer, oops. If I go into this sequencer and I just add in some triggers, if I want to change those triggers, I go to the trigger menu. If I want to change the source sample, I go to the source menu. If I want to change the filter, I go to the filter menu. So you've got, they're very purposeful menus. So if I go to the filter menu, I've got cutoff, I've got resonance, I've got envelope amount, I've got the type of filter, I've got all kinds of things at my fingertips to be able to change on that one page, right? And then if let's say I wanted to just change the sample altogether, I can just go to the source page and I can just change the sample just like that. And then I go back in and I'm on the filter page and I can start changing out my filter settings. If I want to go and change the probability, I can hold, these three steps at the same time and change the probability to 33%. Or I can change them to, let's say, 67%, so you hear them a little bit more, right? So you've got a ton of immediate control. I can go into these three and drop the velocity. I can go into these two and change the length of the sample. Or I can go in and add, delay just to these two. And then I can just go add reverb to this. So you see, it's really fast. So whether you're improvising in a live performance, like the way I perform, or if you're just trying to get a creative idea out of your head and into the machine really quick and work through it, I have yet to see anything that does as much as the Elektron modern machines and remain as immediate and incredibly fast to work on. And my issue is that if it gets too menu divey or too cerebral, I lose the creative idea and I get frustrated and I'm just like, yeah, I'm just not into this anymore. This is just too divey. And that's why I sold my MC707, is because I tried it and I just couldn't make it work. Same with the MPC Live, same with the Machine Plus. I tried all of them, I had them all, and I got rid of all of them because they tried to do too much with too limited space, where these machines pick and choose what they're gonna do so that they can keep them in that same kind of easy to use workflow. So anyway, long explanation. I get wordy sometimes if you've never noticed. Let's see here. Oxy. So you asked also to compare the sequencer to the Oxy. So the Oxy sequencer, Again, there's a reason why I use these two sequencers, because the Oxy sequencer does certain things better than the Elektron sequencers, like random note generation in key and the ability to generate gate separate from pitch, if you're familiar with Modular. So you can have it do a note and you can set a pattern. Well, here, I'll show you again. I'm getting wordy again. So let me just take these off so I can use this same voice here. So if we're playing along on our sound that we have there. So right now I've got, here, I'll make it a 16-step sequence just to make it, don't need that one. So 16-step sequence. So if I want to go in and just generate a pattern that I like, so I'll do a kick so we can hear that. So if I go in and just generate a pattern randomly. Let's say I come up with this. Let's say I come up with a groove that I like, and that's actually got a bit of a long envelope, so it's not. So you can do the sound design here with the pattern here. So let's say I like that pattern, that rhythm, so those gates, if you want. If I want now, I can go into this pitch generator and I can randomly generate pitch, and I have this set up in a certain key. So like right now it's in Phrygian E, my favorite key. And so I have that set up in there. So if I just hit this pitch knob, what this does is it generates random notes separate from the gate. So it doesn't change the pattern. It doesn't change that pattern that I liked. So if I hit this, and every time I hit it, it will change again. I can give it some more range so you hear it jump around a bit more. So the ability to keep a pattern that I like, keep a groove, and then generate random notes and have them stay in key is why I use the Oxy. That's the main reason why I use this machine. Now, it can do a bunch of different stuff, and it does a lot of stuff that I don't use it for. Like, other people are amazing on it, but this ability is really crazy. Then I can go in and individually tweak notes. And the cool thing about it is once you have that set to your key, if I hold down a note and turn the knob to change the note, it's gonna be quantized to that key. So it's only gonna give me the notes that are in key. So performing live, that's one of my fallbacks. I know that no matter what I generate is gonna be in the key that I told it to be in. And if I go in and start playing around and adding notes, I know that I'm going to be adding notes that are in the key that I have it set up at. So as long as I have my track set up on the same key, it gives me a ton of creative freedom to just get in there and improvise. And so the Oxy really allows me to perform the way I perform. The Elektron, it won't generate random notes in key, and it won't generate notes separate from gate. So I can't do this stuff in the Elektron machines. However, what the Elektron machines do is they're great for parameter locking the individual parameters of the synth or the sample engines like you saw before, or sound designing and manipulating those sounds, which the Oxy is not as good at because it would have to do it via CC messages, which you would have to pre-plan what you were going to do so you would know which CC messages you wanted to set up to have it control. And again, because my stuff's improvised, I don't have it set up that way. So I need the immediacy of the Elektrons from a sound design standpoint and a parameter locking standpoint. And then I love the random note generation, key, notes separate from gate, all of that stuff that the Oxy does. So that's why they're very different for me. And comparing to the NC707, to get back to your question, it doesn't do either of those things in a complete way. It has some randomness, it has some ability to do certain things, but it really doesn't do, these are really the experts at those two things. So to use them together is ridiculously powerful, no matter which of the Elektron machines you're using. Let's see here, where are we? Thank you guys, by the way, for all the questions. I really appreciate it. It's great to have when everybody's super engaged and we can kind of go back and forth, even though it's virtually over the internet. Mark, loving your content here, by the way. Awesome, glad to hear it. Can you recommend any other channels that go into depth on live rigs and focus on techno apart from the usual ones? Let's see, the usual ones. You probably watch Analog Kitchen and you probably watch EasyBot. Those are kind of my go-tos. Let's see, who else? Ehor has a bunch of good videos about some really solid techno stuff. Blush Response, his stuff tends to be a bit more about the gear itself, but he does gear reviews in a very improvised, performative way. So you can pick up a lot from his gear review videos, because they're not like, he doesn't sit there and walk you through the spec sheet, like, you know, that's not at all. He's in there like tweaking knobs, so it's very cool that way. I don't know, but if you guys have some other good ones, pop them in here to help out Mark, and I would love to see some new people as well. So let's help each other out. That's what this is all about. What do I think of the Digitakt 2? I think it's awesome. I can't wait to get it, and it's my most hotly awaited piece of gear in quite some time. Hey Ed, good to see you on here. Trying to fix the BPM of a song I'm mixing to be constant. Most of the songs I want to use have dynamic BPM and it changes, which makes it pretty hard to sync it with my drum machine. Any tips? Wow, that's a deep question, kind of depending on the individual piece of music you're making. It's, you know, I would say it's always a good idea to use one machine that controls the BPM for all the machines, and I would use that as something that has the ability to do dynamic BPM changes. So to be able to change BPM during the song and then do that, because if you're trying to do it on multiple machines, it's going to be really difficult, and if it's on a machine that doesn't do that very well, it's going to be difficult as well. But without knowing the individual piece of gear you're working on, I'm not sure. But if you want to post that in here, happy to help. Let's see here. Work from home as a software engineer. Yep. Like, it's amazing to me how many, I think it's a must-have, how many people in the synth nerd world are work from home. Because we love the fact that we can be around our gear and our boxes all the time. But yeah, for sure. Let's see. Hey, I've heard you can use the software or card access to duplicate banks in the Octatrack. Have you ever messed with that? I've been wanting to create my own performance templates. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, you can, like so if you were to open up the EasyBot performance template, for example, you can save that as something else, just like you would in your computer, and then you've saved a different version of it, and then you can get in there and tweak it all you want. You haven't messed up the first one, because basically his performance template is set up as a project. So you just load it up. And if you want to save that as something else, you can totally do that. And you don't necessarily need to do any kind of weird tweaks and fixes to duplicate it. All you have to do is just open it and save it as a different name, and then you've saved everything from it into a different name. So if that's what you're asking, yes. If you're talking about like individual banks, I'm not really sure. But if you're talking about the project itself, yeah. There's not a way to copy scenes from one project to another and things like that. But yeah, as far as like setting up your own performance template, if you want to start with one, just open it up, save it as something else, and then go in and make those changes. Oh, sorry, you said don't want to spend the time to manually copy paste banks, scenes, etc. Yeah, so if you want to do it all at once, do it the way I just said. You can't do individual scenes. That would be amazing if you could. You know, you can't even copy the individual ones from pattern to pattern, like individual scenes. Like, or sorry, from part to part in the Octatrack. They're all kind of their own separate areas. And again, when you get something that's as deep as the Octatrack is, doing things like that are way more complicated because it's got like everything has its fingers into all these different areas of the machine. So there's not like an easy way to kind of copy paste. Unfortunately, that would be maybe in the Octatrack 3, if it ever comes out, you'll be able to copy and paste parts and scenes. Let's see, Michael May, hello. How's it going? Good to see you. Good to see a bunch of the regulars on here and the patrons, which that brings up, I fired up my Patreon a few weeks ago. I hadn't been using that for a while, but I had some changes with work. I stopped working for the same company that I was working with for a long time, started my own consulting firm. And so obviously start up a new company, your income changes a bit. So I'm trying to do some things with music as well on the side. So there's the Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/circlelive, you can check that out. You can go to circlelive.com and there's, we've got some cool new merch like this shirt right here. This is the new logo, if you like it. And if you see the S, it's the S from Circle. So you've got that. I've got these cool new hats as well, which I'm a big fan of, and sweatshirts and jackets and notebooks and beanies and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and grab some of that stuff. There's also, put up my first sample pack, which is on there, which is all sounds that I designed on the Percons. And for those of you who want to mess around with the Percon sounds, but you don't have a Percons and you don't want to spend all the money to get one, I did a Percons specific sample pack, which is in my web shop, which is the circlelive.com/shop. And you can go in there and check that out. I think there's a pop-up on the website where you can get the kicks from that for free if you want. So you can go ahead and check that out on the website as well. But, yeah, and then as I mentioned before, I'm working on a course. So hopefully you guys will be into that. And if you want to jump on the Patreon, one of the things that I saw a couple people on here who are doing this now. With the Patreon, we're doing a new thing where every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock Mountain, we're doing a 1 hour kind of group coaching session. So it's like this, except it's actual like face-to-face via Zoom. So if you join that level of the Patreon, it's $40 a month. So it's like $10 per group session, and you come on, you can ask questions. We'll go through gear stuff. We'll troubleshoot your gear if you want. We'll, if you have a specific thing that you want me to show you how to do, just let me know ahead of time so I can set up the thing to be able to do whatever, whether it's a piece of gear or whatever. We can do that. We've been walking through a bunch of things about how to set up gear for live performance. I was working with Guido, who's one of the people who's been on the call. He's in Germany, and we were going through how to set up his Syntakt in different ways in order to make it easier to perform with and not have to do as much mixing as you perform live. So things like that. It's a lot of fun. And then there's a way to do a different tier where we do one-on-one coaching. So I'm happy to do that as well. So just head over to the Patreon. That's where all that stuff is, or to the website. And of course, you can use affiliate links, which are in the bottom here. If you want to get an Oxy One, if you go through if you use the Circle Live code when you check out on the Oxy Instruments website, you get 5% off your purchase. And I get an affiliate commission as well. So check that as well. Let's see here. Love Ivar's channel as well. Yes, his stuff is so cool. I forgot to mention him. His stuff isn't exclusively techno, and which is one of the reasons why I love it. He does some amazing stuff. And the thing I love about his channel is that each video is basically just one box. And so it gives you a lot of opportunity. If you have that one box, or if you're thinking about getting that one box, it gives you a lot of opportunity to see what that one box can do. So yeah, I totally dig his channel as well. Can Elektron MIDI learn CC value for P-locking without the use of a synth manual? Not until the Digitakt 2. That's another one of the things that the Digitakt 2 is able to do. And not only can you use MIDI learn on the Digitakt 2 to set those CC values, but you can also rename them on your screen and save them, which I was just like, oh my God, this is such an amazing thing. So if you're using that Elektron to control a bunch of other boxes, it used to be, if you went into the MIDI thing, and I'll show you here, I don't know if you can see this because it's probably too small, but if you go into the MIDI section, you're looking at CCs, it's just basically like value 1, value 2, value 3. It didn't give you, and then you had to kind of remember what it was, and if you had a bunch of different machines, it was hard. Now, like, I can set up my my TB03, can set that up as a preset in here. So anytime I plug that in and use that in a thing, I can say, okay, you know, instead of being value 1, that's filter cutoff. Instead of being value 2, that's resonance. Instead of being value 3, that's overdrive. So you can set it up like that, and you can rename the individual things. You only have like 4 characters, but you can rename it and then save that. And so then you can come back to it, which I think is amazing. And that's a brand new thing. The MIDI Learn bit. Yes, as Traversy mentioned, it does have MIDI Learn. Hopefully it'll come in the other boxes. I'm assuming, I mean, that tends to happen a lot with Elektron, is when one box comes out and it has a bunch of upgrades over the next few months, when they do the firmware updates on the others, they'll add in some of them that they can. Sometimes they can't because of just physical abilities to do things. Like, for example, with the Syntakt, you've got 2 inputs that can be stereo or 2 mono inputs that you can route through the effects block. But you can't route them separately like you can on the Digitakt and the Digitone, where they can be, it can be a dual or it can be split and have its own effects. And when I spoke with the people at Elektron, they said they won't be able to do that because it's an analog signal flow. So they would have to have a physical connection to make that happen, and they just didn't set it up that way. So that will be one of those updates that doesn't come, but there are a lot of things hopefully that will come. I mean, I think that the Digitakt 2 can quantize to key like the Oxy, where when you, if you hold down, if you're on the trig page and you hold down the note button, instead of just turning it like normally you hold it down and turn it, it will quantize to key, which is something we've been asking for years on the Elektron boxes. And so hopefully that will come to the other machines. I love the compressor and the fact that you can route it independently and choose which tracks go through the compressor. Hopefully that will come to the others. Very much like, you know, the keyboard fold came to different things when it came. The Euclidean sequencer that's in the analog rhythm is now in the Digitakt 2. So yeah, they tend to do that. Hopefully they will do a bunch more of that as well. Let's see here. How does the 707's 80 possible effects per track plus send stack up with the Digitakt? There are less effects. So with the Digitakt, you don't have effects per track, you have sends. So you don't have individual effects per track. What you do have is a lot of control over each individual send by track that's immediate on the face of it. The 707 has a lot more, but again, you got to go into the menus, get to that, change things, come back out, go into another menu, change that, come back out, go into another menu, change that, come back out. And if you want, if you know what you're going to perform ahead of time, you can assign some of the performance knobs, but you really only have a couple that you can use. Whereas here, for every page of parameters, you've got 8 things that you can get to right away with the knob. So from a functionality point, I mean, like the 707 has way better sounds than than really anything else. I mean, the Elektron synths sound amazing. 707, 808, all those, they sound amazing. Sorry, TR8S and MC707, they sound really great. They're just not, they're not as easy to manipulate live and in an improvised way as what is on the Elektrons. So that's where you have the trade-off. I would love if someday somebody would come up with a box that sounds amazing like the Roland sound synth engines and that had the workflow of the Elektrons. I think that would be the best of both worlds. But for right now, we're stuck with, I shouldn't say stuck with, right now we've got amazing workflow here and we have amazing sounds there. With an okay workflow there and good sounds here. So it's, yeah. Let's see where we at. Use a FaderFox PC12 that's super easy MIDI learn to record MIDI CC and just record the automation, get it on the sequencer to copy it later. Yeah, FaderFox PC12 is great. I've got one sitting over there on the shelf. I love using that if I'm using the Octatrack by itself and not as a performance mixer, but I want to use a ton of the functionality and effects and things like that so that I don't have to dive into all the menus of the Octatrack. The FaderFox, that PC12 is amazing for it. And I would say that, you know, if you've got an MC707 and you want to use those great sound engines, you want to help simplify that menu divey workflow, you might want to use something like a PC12 or a Launch Control XL or something like that to be able to have some more immediate hands-on control to the things that are deeper into the menus of that workflow. Thinking of starting from scratch on a template, just don't know. Yeah, it's talk to Easy about, talk to Matthew. His performance template, the amount of hours and weeks, months, years that it took him to get to the first version of that is ridiculous. And then even going in and just coming up with new effects now, when you look at the depth of the effects, and he would be a great one. I know he does one-on-one coaching, and that's one of the things that he does a lot in his one-on-one coaching is teaches people how to build effects in the Octatrack. So if you don't want all the brain damage of trying to read manuals and watch YouTube videos and figure it out on your own, pay for a few sessions with Matthew, and he can help teach you how to better use the Octatrack to build a performance template. So it would definitely be, I would say, in my mind, definitely worth the money if you want to save all the brain damage that would save from you. Let's see here. Yeah, as Travarsi said, there's a lot of things that we'll probably see as updates, like on Syntakt and Digitone. I mean, I would anticipate there's probably going to be a Digitone 2 coming out soon because it was only a year, I think, newer than the Digitakt. So if the Digitakt 2 just came out, I'm assuming that, you know, somewhere down the line we'll see a Digitone 2. Hopefully they can expand it out to a bit more tracks, some polyphony, bring in some of the other cool effects and functionality that we have in some of the other machines. That would be very cool. And as I said, Syntakt will get a bunch of those things, but some it can't because of the analog signal path of some of the engines and some of the effects. It makes it really difficult to do certain things, but then there's other things that are totally possible. On the fence to sell my Rhythm 2 for Digitakt 2. Don't really use the drum pads on the Rhythm 2. Yeah, so here's the thing. Why the Rhythm 2 is so amazing for me still, even with the prospect of the Digitakt 2, is that, as I was mentioning before, these machines are specialists. So the Digitakt 2 is at its core a sampler. Sample player, sample engine, all that stuff. You can do single cycle waveforms, you can do that stuff, you can do it, turn it into a synth-ish machine, but where it really shines is with samples. The Rhythm, what makes it its amazing machine that it is that you can have an analog synth engine and a sample on every track, on every pad. And you can mix them in different amounts and you can mix between them. So when let's say you're making drum sounds and you wanted to start with a 909 kick. So you take a 909 kick sample and you put it on a pad, but then you want to use an analog synth engine to give it a punchier attack, or to give it, you know, a different shape or sound. Then you can mix those two together and dial in your exact right sound, and then you can resample it, and you have that as a sample that you can use then in the Digitakt 2, or you can assign it to a pad in the Rhythm, and then you can continue to add analog engines and layer them and resample and layer them and resample. So it's something that none of the other machines do. It's kind of like having a Digitakt and a Syntakt in one machine that will sequence together. I used it a lot in performance to mix between samples and synths to get some more variety of drum sounds when I was playing. The other thing you could do on it, for example, if you wanted to have like a synth sound, like a note that you played on a dual VCO analog synth in the rhythm, and then you wanted to have a pad that you layered with that in a sample, you can turn those into one sound with an analog synth sound and then a pad tail on it. So it's crazy powerful, but it's just very different. Every one of the machines that Elektron makes is very different one from the other. So it's not like there's one machine that kills them all. Each one of them does its own thing really, really well so that they can keep this relatively simple workflow. So yeah, so it's hard. I would say if you're thinking about Rhythm Mark II or Digitakt 2, some things that came over from the Rhythm to the Digitakt that made it so that I'm replacing my rhythm in my live setup with the Digitakt 2 is you've got the master overdrive that you have in the rhythm. I don't think it's the same one because it's not analog, but you've got master overdrive at least, so you can kind of fatten up, beef up the sounds. You have more ability to morph between sounds because since you've got stereo, you can pan things, so you can record in samples where you can basically record in two samples coming into the two inputs, and you can morph between them using panning, which is also kind of cool. It's a cool way to get around that kind of dual sample thing, but you have to plan it in advance, which is again not the most ideal, but it's still very cool. They also included a lot of single cycle waveforms that are specifically designed to be kind of synth engines. Although they are digital, they sound pretty cool. So you can use those on the Digitakt 2. So there's a bunch of things that came over that would be cool. The Euclidean sequencer, it's the exact same Euclidean sequencer that's in the Rhythm 2, that's now in the Digitakt 2, which I love because it's the cool Euclidean sequencer. It's better than the one in the Oxy because it has two Euclidean sequencers per track, and you can set them with different amounts of pulses, and then you can set the Boolean operator between them so it will act differently depending on which pulse, on if the pulses both hit on one note, or if neither of them hit, or if one hits or the other. And when you combine that with the ability to parameter lock things to those, it becomes really super cool, and nobody else has come up with anything like that. So also very, very cool. Just ordered the Rhythm Mark II Analog 4, and now I need a Digitakt 2. Any tips on free money? I don't know, OnlyFans, I guess, is probably the best way to go that route. But yeah, it's, I have the Analog Rhythm Mark II and I love it, and I don't want to ever sell it. And I'm getting the Digitakt 2, and I don't think that one replaces the other. I think that they're just supplements one to the other. Minor Joy Records, hey everyone. Let's see. Longtime fan from Spain. Hey, buenos dias. I am just starting to try to produce some music, and as a baby producer, I'm encountering a big issue. Can I make groovy ass things? I can make groovy ass things, but I can't structure it. Yeah, there's a lot of practice that comes into that, and doing it in hardware machines and not in a DAW makes the structure a bit harder because you have to learn a lot more how to use the machines in order to do some of that structure stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of practice involved in that. If you have the Elektron machines, you can multi-track the groovy stuff into your DAW of choice using Overbridge, and then you can structure it out that way. I have always used the workflow in Ableton where I create clips in the performance mode, and then I hit record and perform them as I'm recording them into the timeline in the arrangement mode, and then I go into the arrangement mode I hit stop at the end and I go over to that mode, and then I fine tune and I'll go in and adjust and fix transitions and add some automation, and I'll do stuff like that. But it's a great way to keep that live performance feel in a production thing, and that's all built into Ableton, which is one of the reasons why I've used it for a long time. So Ruffian, hey, how's it going? Where's everybody here from, by the way? I'm curious. We've had a few. I know Mark's in Amsterdam, just had one from Spain. I know where a few of you are. I know Travarsi's in LA. So let me know where you guys are. I'm curious just to know. It's always interesting for me from my basement music studio in Colorado to see where these streams and these videos go to. I love it. It's one of my favorite things about this, is being able to build up this kind of community and group of people and friends all over the world that we couldn't have if we didn't have this internet and all that stuff. So it's pretty cool. Let's see. Oh, here we have the rest of that comment. I make an awesome verse, but can't for the life of me make a chorus that makes sense. How should I go about breaking that barrier? One thing when you're first starting off in music production, it's as obvious as it may sound, one of the things you need to do is listen to a lot of music, but listen not as a fan or a clubber or a radio listener or whatever. Listen as a producer and say, okay, these are 10 groups that I really like. And something somebody mentioned to me a while ago, which I think was a great idea. They said, when you're first starting out, try to copy songs you like, just for practice. Like you want to eventually get away from that. You want to eventually get away from doing what other people are doing and kind of do your own sound. But you learn a ton by trying to recreate sounds on synths that you hear in other sounds. And you learn a lot about song structure by copying the structure of something else, using reference tracks. So if you drag a reference track into a DAW, and you can see where the breaks are, where the buildups are, and things like that, and try to copy it at first so that you get practice of copying it, and then move away from the copying side of things and go into your own. A good friend of mine, Jason Timothy, wrote a fantastic book. You can get it on Amazon. That's The Mental Game of Electronic Music Production, I think. I'll look it up and see. I'll post a link to it. And one of the things that he says a lot, and I've said this a lot in my things, is that you have to make a lot of shitty music before you make good music. And so one of the best ways to get to the good music is they say you have to make 100 crap tracks before you make one good one. So the best way to get to the good one is to make the 100 as fast as you can. And it doesn't mean come up with 100 8-bar loops. It means do 100 tracks start to finish. And Jason's thing is all about finishing music. If you just practice loops, you'll get good at loops. If you practice starting tracks, you'll get good at starting tracks. But you'll never get good at finishing tracks unless you practice finishing tracks. So you have to get in there and actually do it a lot of times. So start to finish 100 tracks, and they'll suck. Don't put them out. Don't show them to anybody. Just make them just for you. Store them away so that you can laugh at them 10 years from now once you've become an amazing producer. But get those first 100 shitty tracks out of the way, and that will get you to the good tracks much faster. So that's the biggest advice. Copy it first to learn structure using references, then move away from that and start building your own tracks. Do 100 of them that you never show to anybody, you don't put out there, you don't think like, oh my God, this is amazing, I got to get this signed, or sending it to labels or whatever. Just make them for you and get over the idea of making, or get over the necessity of making shitty songs in order to get to the good ones. But it'll take you probably 100. So go down that road. Let's see here. Mark, it's funny that you say that about Elektron. I totally agree, by the way. What's the USP of the Analog 4? I'm not sure what you mean by USP. Define that for me. But yeah. Let's see here, the Netherlands, awesome. Hampshire in English. Oh, unique selling point. Sorry, I was out of my day job business mode. So when you say USP, I'm like, for me, it's unique selling proposition, but I was totally like out of that mode. So unique selling proposition, unique selling point of the Analog 4. So it's a 4-voice multi-timbral monosynth that's analog in one box, which was novel at the time when it came out. Just like the Digitone was a 4-voice multi-timbral FM synth. Now it's less novel because the Syntakt has multiple analog voices and digital voices as well. It also has more CV gate connectivity than any of the new boxes. So if you want to have it play with older machines like an SH-101 or something like that that doesn't have MIDI, you can use it for that. It's unique because it has some polyphony, and it's a flexible polyphony. So you can steal voices and you can have it be a 4-voice polyphonic single timbre synth, if that makes sense, or 2 timbres with 2 voices of I guess it's not really polyphony. What's it called? Duophony. So it was cool how they did the whole kind of voice stealing thing to get you to have the flexibility of doing polyphonic or multi-track mono. I would love to see some of that functionality come to machines like the Syntakt and the Digitakt. I would say that as a future wish update, even though I'm not a huge polyphonic guy, I know a lot of people are. So now that the Digitakt 2 has 16 tracks, to have the ability to do voice stealing to make some of them polyphonic, I think would be really interesting if they could work that into future things. So you could have 8 tracks of mono, whether it was drums or whatever, and then let's say 2 4-voice polyphonic voices. Would be really interesting to do that, and maybe they'll do that with the next version of the Digitone when it comes out. Although they may not need to, they may be able to just add more polyphony. But that whole voice stealing thing, I think, was unique to the Analog 4, and so I'd like to see that coming out more in everything else. Cheers from Poland. Appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you guys for being here. It's nice to have everybody tuning in and sharing my Sunday morning with me here in Colorado. I will say, for those of you that are in Europe, I'm leaving for Europe in a week from Tuesday. And so maybe I can connect with some of you over there. Would love to. If you are there at any of the events, please come up and introduce yourself and let me know that you go on the live streams or that we've chatted online or whatever, because I see your name and I don't know who that is and I don't see your face and whatever. So yeah, definitely come up to it. I'll be in Berlin from the 15th to the 21st, I believe. So that's for Super Booth, a couple gigs and events, to be announced, not sure, not totally finalized yet, that I'm staying in Europe for a few days, moving up north. I'll be going to Netherlands and Belgium, and then I have a show on the 24th, I think, whatever that date is. Let me see here. 24, yes. On the 24th in Brussels, dialing in, there's a couple of possible options, so I'll let you know a little bit ahead of time what the venue is going to be, but there for sure gig in Brussels on the 24th, which will be cool. And I'll be traveling around a bit in between, so if you're around, definitely hit me up. Would love to meet up if you are in any of those places. And if you have some ideas of where I should go and hang out, I've spent a lot of time in Europe, and so I'm always kind of trying to find new places to go. So I have like 3 days in between shows. So if you got some ideas, definitely let me know. Ed's in Texas. Yes, Ed is on our calls on Saturdays, so he can let you know how those have been. I think it's been pretty cool. So yeah, if you want to go through the Patreon, and sign up for those, that would be awesome. We'd love to have some more people on there. Thank you. Such a good breakdown of your knowledge. You're welcome. Love to share the knowledge, as Ricky Tinez always says. Thanks for putting in the effort again. Looking forward to being part of the studio sesh anytime soon. Yeah, I'm going to be doing these a lot more. Obviously, I won't be doing these for the couple weeks that I'm on the road, but I will be doing more of the vlog style stuff, travel vlog, but really focused on this. I'm not going to be like, hey, here's the best way to, get into the airport lounge and whatever. But it'll definitely be focused on music and travel, like how to get from place to place, how to use, how to travel with gear, how to pack, and why I choose the gear I choose in order to be able to travel live and to travel to play live. And then, a bit of the how to travel. I mean, like I said, with my day job, I build up a lot of points and miles and stuff. I think when I was looking at my frequent flyer thing on United last year, I think I had 54 flights last year, 54 flight segments. So it gets you some pretty good flight status. So you get cool upgrades. So you can have more comfortable travel and stuff like that, which is great, because that way when I travel with family, or if I'm going to something like Super Booth or whatever, I can get a comfy place to relax and make some music on the plane and use the lounges, which I get again through the airline. So it's pretty cool and it's fun. And so we'll talk a bit about that and how I use music on the go, which is tons of fun. I love it. I love making music on planes. I just think it's a cool environment. You're kind of focused. You can't do a bunch of other stuff at that time. So you get kind of in your zone. And so I'll be doing that. Hopefully I'll have my Digitakt 2 by then. And my whole plan is to spend a bunch of time doing cool new stuff in the Digitakt 2 while I'm on these flights and trains and in hotels and stuff like that. So it should be a ton of fun. And so let's see, shout out from Oklahoma. Cool. Welcome from Oklahoma. Rotterdam. I'm actually hoping to go to Rotterdam on this trip. I have never been to Rotterdam. So I've been to Amsterdam and I've been to Brussels, but I've never been in between. So I'm hoping to go to Rotterdam on this trip and maybe pop in and visit some people. So if you're in Rotterdam, we'll definitely look you up. Looking forward to seeing you live at Super Booth. Oh, cool. So you'll be at Super Booth and then going back home to Rotterdam. So introduce yourself at Super Booth and then we can chat and you can tell me what I definitely have to see and visit and do when I have my day or two in Rotterdam. The Netherlands is well represented. Yes, indeed. It always is. Like you guys, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Stonebridge, artist who's been around forever. He wrote Show Me Love with Robin S. and he's from Sweden. And I got to meet him and hang out with him a ton years ago. He's a mutual friend of mine, friend of a friend. And I was asking him, like, why is there so much great electronic music that comes out of Sweden and the Netherlands and places like that? And he had the funniest answer. He said, because the winter sucks so bad and you have to be inside that there's nothing else to do. And so you just start spending time in a studio, which I thought was hilarious. And he was saying that that's why there was so much good music in Sweden. But it was, it's funny. But obviously, the Netherlands is like hotbed of electronic music forever. I mean, between Amsterdam and Rotterdam, you guys have been doing it for years, and legends like Speedy J in Rotterdam are still doing things like the Stour events that are second to none, like the best events in the world, bar none, for live electronic music. And I can't wait for ADE this year in Amsterdam to go to Stour again, because it is the best music event I've ever been to in my life as far as a performance goes. Super Booth, on the other hand, is the best music event I've ever been to in general, because the vibe at Super Booth is so cool, and I hope I can show that a bit with the content that I'm going to make there. But just the amount of time that you spend kind of hanging out with people and chatting and meeting, and it's like you arrive on the grounds at Super Booth, and I always just feel like I'm with my people. It's like all these people who were there for music and instruments and gear and performance and the technology side of it, and it just makes it so much fun to be, you know, around everybody and getting inspired by other people and hearing music, and obviously being in Berlin and going out to the clubs and going to shows and playing shows and all that stuff. You just get so much inspiration, because between the Netherlands and Berlin in particular, it's just like, I always feel like I come back to the States and I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm recharged with what this kind of music, at least the kind that I make, is all about. And it just kind of, it fills me up. And so I'm so excited for it, and I just can't wait. And yeah, it's going to be very, very, very cool. Let's see here. Yes, you guys, we know how you are when it comes to electronic music. Is the analog rhythm still my favorite piece? Yes. It's still, as I mentioned before, the fact that it's an analog synth and a sample player in the same machine that can easily layer those two things together and then resample and create new sounds for creating new, particularly drum sounds, but it can do other stuff. But for creating drum sounds, like every drum sound that is in my Digitakt either comes from the analog rhythm or the percons. And anything that is a real kind of traditional drum sound, like a kick drum or hats or things like that, for the most part, those all come from the analog rhythm. Percons is great for percussion, kind of like the DFAM. It's got the sound design aspect of it for on the percussion side is really, really cool. But for kind of traditional drums, like all the kicks that I use, like they all come from the analog rhythm. They're all made in the analog rhythm. Let's see, you got my Digitakt 2 on pre-order from Thomann, 2 to 3 weeks. Can't wait. I'm right with you. Can't wait to get mine. I use Serum for synthesis sequenced from software, which allows patterns to be extremely free-form, considering a Syntakt, which is nice for synthesis, but I fear it would be too rigid in terms of grids. Yeah, Serum in. Are you using Ableton, using Logic, using Bitwig? What's your DAW of choice? Because I will tell you, 5 or 6, something like that. It's been a long time. It's been decades. And to this day, right now, I have in my desk, I have my original Oxy one, the first one that I got. And this is in the keyboard tray of my desk, and it sequences Ableton. So if I'm going to use VSTs, which I do use as well, I'm a big fan of Diva. I use that one a lot. Absinthe, if you guys are familiar with that one, it's an older one, which I still use a ton. Pigments I use the Arturia V collection a lot. But the sequencers, like the sequencers that are built into Ableton suck. Like they're so boring. Extreme modular randomness version of a sequencer, and they skip over this kind of functional version of random generation in key and probabilities and things like that you can do really easily in the Elektron sequencers and the Oxy sequencers. So I tend to always sequence things in Ableton. That's underneath in that drawer is my Syntakt, and they're both connected to sequence things in Ableton, just because I'm not a big fan of the Ableton sequencers. And there are some good ones. The problem is you just have to kind of build them each time and build a new one. It's like it's a pain in the butt. Let's see, can you please give some tips for MIDI routing? MIDI over USB over a MIDI route. It's mostly the DIN MIDI using cables, but talks a little bit about that. I would say that, again, tips, this is going to sound like it's a commercial for Ableton, but since I just talked about how bad their sequencers are, maybe gives it some additional impartiality, is the way that it can really easily adjust latency. And it's really simple and it's immediate and it's bi-channel, and so it's really good that way. And then you can save things as a template. So I have my studio set up here so that over on this side, you can't, if I can turn this, you can see it. So I have Mixer, which is is going through the mixer, and then down below the mixer, you can't see it there, but I have rack mounted the MRCC, which is the MIDI routing thing from Conductive Labs. So it's got 12 ins, 12 outs, plus USB connectivity to Ableton. So what desk there, that clocks Ableton, and then Ableton clocks the MRCC, which then goes out to everything else in the room. And that goes in and out to everything else in the room. So it's got the ability for different keyboards to control different devices, and then everything comes in through three different audio interfaces. So I've got the Tascam Model 24, and then over there I have the Tascam Celestonic 20X20. Then anything that can do audio over USB, I have that going in audio over USB, and anything that is Elektron, I have connected via Overbridge so that it can all be multi-tracked in Ableton. And then what I did is, once I have everything kind of routed the way I wanted it routed, about how I kind of set up templates in Ableton, I'll use those templates to, they have everything already routed to multiple channels, and the channels are just collapsed. So if I don't need them, I don't use them. But if I want to start jamming, I can just hit record and then start playing around with things in the studio into Ableton. So I can just record into there. And then if I want to, I can open up individual channels on there and go in and add effects or things like that if I want to do that as well. So that's kind of how everything is set up here. Let's see here. All right, we'll see you later, Mark. Have a nice day. Yeah, I'm going to wrap things up here pretty quick. We're hitting the 2-hour mark. Your take on Analog 4 after all those years on the market. And the Syntakt does most everything other than the polyphony that the Analog 4 does. So if polyphony is important to you, maybe get an Analog 4, but I would go Syntakt if it was me. Use an Analog 4 MK2 by any chance? Yes, I did have an MK2, but as I said earlier in the stream, I traded it for a Mode trade straight across, which I think I got a killer deal on that. Greetings from South Dakota. Awesome. That's so great. I'll be doing more techno from scratch tutorials. Love hearing your thought process. Yes, I'll be doing a ton of those. And most of the live things that I do, I mean, just so you know, if you see a live performance video that's up there, like I just did one this last week, those are all from scratch. Like those are all performed live. I make them up on the fly. I'm in starting point drum patterns, but then I'm doing everything live on the fly. So I don't have any sounds or any of that, sorry, not any sounds, any tracks prepared that I perform. So yeah, those are all, but then yeah, a lot of these videos, this one was a lot of talking on purpose. I kind of came out with the idea that I've been getting questions about doing an Ask Me Anything one. So I figured I would just less talking, although talking about the music and explaining a little bit is what we always do. Let's see. How do you soundproof your studio? I didn't. I'm in the basement, and it's kind of a jog of the building. So 3 sides are concrete. If you're familiar with Junkie XL, he's a producer who's been around since the 90s doing electronic music, and now he does movie scores. He has a great channel on YouTube that's a studio work session. When I say he does movie scores, like Deadpool and Dark Knight and Furiosa, and like he does movie scores like big time, and he has no sound treatment in his studio either. And I love the thing that he says, like, if I can make it sound good in a shitty untreated room, it's going to sound good in other places. So I think people get too caught up on that. One thing that I do have that's, I guess, negative or positive, it works in my favor, is I have a lot of stuff in this room. So like I have a sofa over there, I've got things hanging on the walls. I did put up this fabric kind of behind, because I do like having a lot of things that keep things from bouncing around. But yeah, as far as sound treatment, no, nothing. You're here in Denver also. Hey, Art, cool. Are you coming to the Colorado Modular Synth Society chat this afternoon at what's it called? I can't remember, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to be giving a chat on live performance. So if you're going to be there, say hey. I'm not sure if it's me, but the stream breaking up for others too. Yeah, it's probably me. The internet here is kind of hit or miss. It's its own thing. I think it's incredibly powerful. I feel like the Elektron boxes, the Digitakt, things like that are a lot for me more musically intuitive than the trackers. Trackers are really fast if you want to do a lot of kind of glitchy drum and bass, that type of stuff. They're really good for that kind of stuff. I feel like the interface and the workflow of the Elektrons is a bit more musical, but that's just me. MIDI clock management. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was just saying. The way in another stream, I'll walk through that. I'll do a studio tour because I get asked about that a lot. So I'll do a studio tour where I'll kind of walk around with a handheld camera. So I'll show you all the messy cables behind the certain things. So I'll show you how everything's worked all together. I'll do that on another stream. But yeah, I think we're going to call it there. But thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope to see you on the next live stream, or at one of the shows, or at Super Booth, or at the Colorado Modular Synth Society meetup, or in Brussels, or let's grab a beer in Berlin when we're there, or something like that. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. As always, it's great to see you. And